Montana, 1889. There are some people who learn how to live with loneliness, not because they enjoy it, not because they chose it, but because after enough years, loneliness becomes familiar. It settles into the corners of a house like dust, becoming part of the furniture, part of the routine, part of life itself. Ethan Carter was one of those people. At 55 years old, he owned one of the largest cattle ranches outside Silver Creek, Montana. Nearly 400 acres stretched across rolling grasslands and shallow streams that sparkled beneath the endless western sky. It was good land. The cattle were healthy. The fences stood straight. The barn roof didn't leak. Everything on the ranch worked exactly as it should. Everything except Ethan. Not that anyone would have said so. In town, people respected him. He paid his debts. He kept his word. He attended church every Sunday. If a neighbor needed help repairing a fence, Ethan was the first to arrive. If a family fell on hard times, somehow a sack of supplies would appear on their porch before sunrise. He was known as a good man. But good men can still be lonely. His wife, Rebecca, had died 12 years earlier after a long illness. For months he had watched her grow weaker. For months he had prayed for a miracle. The miracle never came. After she died, Ethan buried himself in work. Every day became another task. Another fence to repair. Another horse to train. Another season to survive. And eventually, grief became routine. The pain never disappeared. It simply became quieter. Like an old injury that still aches whenever rain is coming. His only constant companion was an aging ranch dog named Duke. Duke was a large brown shepherd mix with gray around his muzzle and wise eyes that seemed to understand far more than a dog should. Most evenings Ethan sat alone on the porch while Duke rested beside him. Neither felt the need to talk. The silence suited them. At least that was what Ethan told himself. Then Sarah Whitmore arrived. The entire town noticed her. Small towns always notice newcomers. Sarah arrived in late September with a wagon, a few belongings, and an 8-year-old daughter named Lily. She rented a modest house near the church and immediately became the subject of every conversation in Silver Creek. Some people said she came from Wyoming. Others claimed Colorado. One man insisted he knew her late husband had been a banker. Nobody actually knew. What everyone did know was that she was young, beautiful, and widowed. Sarah was 35 years old. She had chestnut-colored hair usually tied back in a simple braid and kind green eyes that somehow seemed both strong and sad at the same time. The sadness came from losing her husband 3 years earlier. The strength came from surviving it. Lily, meanwhile, possessed enough energy to keep an entire town awake. She asked questions about everything. She talked to everyone. Within a week she knew half the residents of Silver Creek by name. Within 2 weeks she knew their horses' names as well. People liked Sarah. People adored Lily. Ethan knew none of this. He rarely paid attention to town gossip. He came to town once a week for supplies and left as quickly as possible. Which is why their first meeting happened entirely by accident. A violent autumn storm rolled across Montana one afternoon. Heavy rain turned roads into rivers of mud. Wind bent trees nearly sideways. Most people stayed indoors. Sarah and Lily had not expected the storm. They had been returning from town when their wagon wheel sank deep into the mud less than a mile from Ethan's ranch. For nearly an hour Sarah struggled to free it. The wagon refused to move. Lily tried helping. The horse tried helping. Nothing worked. By the time Ethan rode past, both were covered in mud. He slowed his horse. Sarah looked up. For a moment neither spoke. Then Ethan tipped his hat. "Looks stuck." Sarah laughed despite herself. "That obvious?" "Little bit." Lily stepped forward immediately. "Mister, can you help us?" Ethan glanced at the wagon. Then at the approaching storm clouds. Then at the child staring hopefully at him. No point leaving folks stranded. 20 minutes later the wagon was free. Sarah brushed wet hair from her face. "Thank you. You would have managed." Eventually. The storm would have arrived first. That earned another laugh. A genuine one. The kind that appears before a person remembers they are supposed to be serious. Ethan noticed. He wasn't sure why. "You're Ethan Carter?" Sarah said. He looked surprised. "How do you know that?" "Everyone in town knows Ethan Carter." "That's unfortunate." She smiled. "I don't think so." Lily climbed into the wagon. "Mom says you're the nicest rancher in Montana." Sarah looked horrified. "Lily." "What?" "You did." Ethan actually smiled. A rare event. Duke says I'm difficult. Duke? My dog. Lily gasped. You have a dog? One. Can I meet him? Sarah sighed. I'm sorry. It's all right. Ethan looked at Lily. Maybe someday. Lily's grin was immediate. Sarah noticed something then. The stern rancher everyone described wasn't nearly as stern when speaking to children. It was an interesting observation. One she remembered. The next week she stopped by the ranch. Officially, she came to return a tool Ethan had lent her. Unofficially, she wanted to thank him properly. Lily wanted to meet Duke. Duke immediately approved of Lily. Within 5 minutes they were running through the yard together. Within 10 minutes Duke had surrendered completely and was allowing Lily to scratch behind his ears. Traitor, Ethan thought. Sarah sat on the porch. Ethan brought coffee. They talked. Mostly about ordinary things. The weather. The town. Ranch life. Nothing important. Yet somehow the conversation felt easy. Comfortable. When Sarah finally left, Ethan watched the wagon disappear down the road, then he realized he was still watching long after it was gone. That bothered him. The visits continued. Sometimes Sarah brought homemade bread. Sometimes Lily brought questions. Sometimes they simply stopped by for coffee. Weeks became months. Autumn slowly surrendered to winter. And without either of them noticing, a friendship began taking shape. Lily became a regular fixture around the ranch. She followed Ethan everywhere. She wanted to learn everything. How to saddle horses. How to repair fences. How to identify animal tracks. Ethan taught her patiently. Far more patiently than anyone would have expected. One afternoon Sarah watched them working together in the barn. Lily was attempting to hammer a loose board. The hammer missed repeatedly. Ethan never once showed frustration. Instead he quietly adjusted her grip and encouraged her to try again. Eventually she succeeded. The smile on Lily's face could have illuminated the entire valley. Sarah felt something tighten inside her chest. Not sadness. Not exactly happiness. Something deeper. Something more dangerous. Hope. Meanwhile the town had begun talking. Again. Some residents approved. Others didn't. The age difference became a favorite topic of discussion. Sarah ignored them. Mostly. Ethan pretended not to hear. But he did. Every word. One evening at the feed store, a younger rancher made a careless comment. Seems a woman Sarah's age could do better than an old ranch hand. The room went quiet. Ethan said nothing. He paid for his supplies and left. But the words followed him home. That night he sat on the porch with Duke. The dog rested beside him. Stars filled the sky overhead. You hear that? Ethan asked. Duke remained silent. Probably true. Duke looked unimpressed. She's young. The dog yawned. Smart too. No response. And she's got her whole life ahead of her. Duke slowly placed his head on Ethan's boot. The gesture somehow felt like disagreement. Ethan sighed. Because deep down he knew the truth. He looked forward to Sarah's visits. He enjoyed hearing Lily laugh. The house felt less empty when they were there. The silence felt less permanent. And that frightened him. He had spent 12 years convincing himself he no longer needed anyone. Now that certainty was beginning to crack. Across town, Sarah sat beside her fireplace after Lily had gone to bed. She stared into the flames. Thinking. Remembering. Wondering. Her late husband had been a good man. She would always care about him. But grief was no longer the center of her life. For the first time in years she found herself imagining a future again. And whenever she imagined that future, Ethan Carter somehow appeared in it. His quiet strength. His honesty. His kindness toward Lily. The way he listened. The way he always made sure there was enough coffee for everyone before sitting down himself. Small things. Important things. The sort of things people often overlooked. Sarah didn't. Outside, snow began falling softly across Silver Creek. Winter was arriving. And neither Ethan nor Sarah realized that the coming months would force both of them to confront feelings they had spent years trying to avoid. Winter arrived early that year. By December, snow covered the Montana plains in an endless blanket of white. The ranch looked different beneath the frost. The fields were quieter. The rivers moved slower. Even the wind seemed softer somehow. Yet Ethan Carter felt less peaceful than he had in years. That should have surprised him. For over a decade, his life had followed the same predictable path. Work, sleep, repeat. No complications. No expectations. No heartbreak. Now everything had changed. And the reason was a woman named Sarah Whitmore. The realization came gradually, like sunrise creeping over distant mountains. Impossible to stop. Impossible to ignore. Every morning he wondered if she might visit. Every afternoon he found himself looking toward the road. Every evening he replayed their conversations in his mind. The situation was becoming increasingly difficult to deny. Duke noticed first. Dogs usually do. The old shepherd had developed a habit of running to the gate whenever he heard wagon wheels. Sometimes it was Sarah. Sometimes it wasn't. Either way, Duke seemed convinced that solving Ethan's personal life was now part of his responsibilities. One snowy afternoon, Sarah arrived carrying a basket covered with a cloth. Lily raced ahead. Ethan. He looked up from repairing a saddle. Afternoon. We brought pie. I see that. Apple pie. That explains your excitement. It should. Sarah laughed. You'll have to forgive her. She helped bake it. Then I appreciate the warning. Lily gasped dramatically. I'm an excellent baker. Last week you burned toast. That was one time. 3 times. Sarah smiled while watching them. Something about seeing Ethan tease Lily made her heart ache in the best possible way. Because she knew exactly what she was looking at. A good man. Not perfect. Not flashy. Not wealthy enough to impress society. But good. And increasingly important to her. That evening they shared coffee near the fireplace while snow drifted outside. The atmosphere felt warm. Comfortable. Almost like family. Which was precisely what frightened Ethan. Because family meant attachment. Attachment meant loss. And loss was something he understood too well. A few days later he made a decision. A terrible decision. One that seemed logical at the time. He began creating distance. When Sarah visited he stayed busy. When she invited conversation he kept answers short. When Lily asked questions he pretended to have work elsewhere. The change was subtle. But noticeable. Sarah noticed immediately. By the second week she understood exactly what was happening. Ethan was retreating. The realization hurt more than she expected. Not because she was angry. Because she cared. One Friday afternoon she rode to the ranch alone. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she approached the house. Ethan opened the door. Sarah. We need to talk. His stomach immediately tightened. About what? You know exactly about what. He stepped aside. She entered. The room felt unusually quiet. Duke wisely left. Some conversations were beyond even his abilities. Sarah folded her arms. Why are you avoiding me? I'm not. You are. No. Ethan. He sighed. The problem with Sarah was that she saw too much. Lying to her was nearly impossible. Finally he looked away. You deserve better. The words hung in the air. Sarah stared at him. Then she shook her head. There it is. What? The nonsense. He blinked. The nonsense. Yes, the nonsense. For the first time in months, Ethan looked genuinely confused. Sarah stepped closer. You've decided what I deserve without asking me. I'm trying to be realistic. You're trying to be afraid. The statement landed perfectly. Because it was true. Ethan looked toward the window. I've already buried one wife. Sarah's expression softened. The pain in his voice was impossible to miss. Rebecca mattered. She still does. I know. He swallowed hard. I don't know if I can survive losing someone again. Silence filled the room. Then Sarah spoke quietly. My husband died 3 years ago. Ethan looked at her. I know. No. You know the fact. You don't know what it felt like. She paused. I was terrified afterward. Every day. I thought if I loved again, I'd just be creating another opportunity for pain. The room grew still. Because now they were both telling the truth. Not polite truth. Real truth. The kind people usually hide. Sarah took another step forward. Then one day I realized something. What? Pain isn't the price of love. Ethan frowned. No. No. Love is the reward. Pain is simply the risk. The words settled deep inside him. For a long moment neither spoke. Then a small voice interrupted from the doorway. Did I come at a bad time? They turned. Lily stood there holding Duke's collar. Apparently neither child nor dog had gone very far. Sarah laughed despite herself. Lily. What? How long have you been standing there? The girl considered. A little while. Ethan groaned. Lily walked into the room. Then she looked directly at him. You know Mom smiles more when you're around. The room became silent again. Children have a remarkable talent for saying things adults spend months avoiding. Lily continued. And you smile more too. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it, because there wasn't much to argue with. That night a powerful winter storm struck Silver Creek. The worst storm of the season. Snow fell relentlessly. Winds howled across the plains. Travel became impossible. Sarah and Lily had planned to return home after dinner. Instead they found themselves stranded at the ranch. The storm lasted through the night, then through the next day. And during those long hours something changed. They cooked together, talked together, laughed together, played cards beside the fire. Lily eventually fell asleep on the couch with Duke beside her. Late that evening Ethan stood near the fireplace watching them. Sarah joined him. Neither spoke for a while. The fire crackled softly. Outside, snow battered the windows. Inside, everything felt peaceful. Then Ethan understood something. A truth so simple he couldn't believe he had missed it. He already loved them. Not someday. Not eventually. No. The realization wasn't dramatic. It arrived quietly. Like certainty. Like coming home. Sarah seemed to read the answer in his eyes. You figured it out. Maybe. She smiled. About time. For the first time in years Ethan laughed. A genuine laugh. The kind that starts deep in the chest. The kind that feels unfamiliar after too many lonely years. Winter eventually passed. Spring followed. Snow melted. Grass returned. The world began again. And one bright April morning Ethan rode into town. Not for supplies. Not for cattle business. For something far more important. Sarah was tending flowers outside her house when she saw him approaching. Immediately she knew. There was something different about him. A certainty. A calmness. He dismounted. Walked toward her. Removed his hat. And held it in his hands. Sarah smiled. I've seen that look before. You have. It's your serious look. That's unfortunate. She laughed. What brings you here, Ethan? He took a deep breath. Then another. I spent 12 years believing my life was finished. Sarah's smile faded into something softer. I know. I thought love belonged to my past. He paused. I was wrong. Sarah's eyes never left his. Ethan reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small ring, and suddenly forgot every speech he had prepared. So he spoke honestly instead. Sarah, I don't promise perfection. Tears immediately filled her eyes. I don't promise wealth. His voice trembled slightly. I don't promise easy years. She covered her mouth. But I promise loyalty. Pause. Kindness. Another pause. Honesty. His eyes met hers. And every day I have left, the world seemed to stop. Birds sang somewhere nearby. A breeze moved through the trees. Sarah felt tears slipping down her cheeks. Ethan. I love you. The words finally existed between them. Simple. Powerful. True. I love Lily. He smiled. I even love being outnumbered in arguments. Sarah laughed through tears. Then Ethan held out the ring. Will you marry me? She didn't hesitate. Not even for a second. Yes. The answer came instantly. Because it had always been yes. The wedding took place in June. Nearly the entire town attended. People filled every pew. Even those who had once criticized the relationship showed up. Love has a way of changing opinions. Or making them irrelevant. Lily proudly declared herself the most important person at the wedding. Nobody argued. Duke served as an unofficial guardian of the ceremony. Several guests claimed he looked proud. They were probably right. The years that followed were good years. Not perfect. No life is. But good. The house that had once felt empty became filled with laughter. With conversations. With family dinners. With life. Ethan became the father Lily needed. Not by replacing anyone. But by being himself. Steady. Patient. Present. 10 years later, Ethan sat on the porch watching the sunset. Sarah sat beside him. Lily, now grown, was laughing somewhere in the distance. The ranch looked much the same. But everything important had changed. Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. You know, she said softly, you almost missed all of this. Ethan smiled. I know. You spent months convincing yourself you weren't worthy. I know that too. She squeezed his hand. What changed? Ethan looked across the fields glowing beneath the evening sun. Then he looked at the woman beside him. The day I stopped counting my years. Sarah smiled. And started counting what? He kissed her forehead gently. The people who made those years worth living. The sun disappeared beyond the horizon. The Montana sky turned gold. And Ethan Carter, who had once believed love belonged only to the young, sat beside the woman who had proven otherwise. Some blessings arrive early. Others arrive late. But the best ones arrive exactly when they're needed.